I still remember the night like it was burned into my skin. I was 16, half asleep when the bedroom light snapped on. My stepdad, Mark, stood in the doorway with his arms crossed. His voice was flat, like he was reading off a list. "Pack your things, Kimberly. My boys need this room now." For a moment, I thought I was dreaming. Behind him, I saw the faces of his 2 sons peeking in, smiling like they had already won. My mother stood a step back, her eyes down, saying nothing. My heart raced. "You can't be serious," I whispered, still clutching my blanket. "I'm dead serious," Mark said, stepping aside. "You're old enough. Time you learn to fend for yourself." I looked at my mother. She didn't move, didn't defend me. My chest ached worse than if she had slapped me. Slowly, I stuffed clothes into my old backpack, hands trembling. Outside, the night air cut into me. My mother's shadow hovered behind the screen door, but she never opened it. Mark's voice carried after me. "Don't come back begging. You made your choice tonight." But I hadn't made any choice. They had made it for me. I sat on the curb, tears rolling hot down my face, clutching the backpack like it held my whole world. That night, I wasn't a daughter anymore. I wasn't even family. I was just thrown away. I ended up at my best friend's house. Her mom let me crash on the living room floor with a thin blanket. I curled up small, trying to breathe quietly so nobody would hear me crying. "Don't worry," my friend whispered from the couch. "It's just for a little while. Things will work out." But her voice sounded unsure, like even she didn't believe it. The house was warm, smelled like cinnamon, and the TV murmured softly from the kitchen. But inside me everything felt cold. I thought about my own house, how warm my bed had been, how my stepbrothers probably lay under my sheets right then, laughing, while I lay on the floor like an unwanted guest. I stared at the ceiling and remembered my stepdad's words. "Don't come back begging." The humiliation burned deep. He had stripped me of everything. My room, my mother's love, my sense of belonging. I hugged my knees to my chest and told myself I would never give him the satisfaction of seeing me broken. But in the quiet, when no one was watching, I made a silent promise. One day, I'll make him regret this. He'll see me again, not as the girl he threw out, but as someone he'll wish he had never crossed. At 16, I didn't know how. I didn't know when. But I swore that night, on a borrowed pillow, that I would rise. The next weeks were brutal. I stayed at my friend's house as long as I could, but I knew I couldn't live there forever. I started working longer shifts at the diner downtown. I wore a uniform 2 sizes too big and smelled like grease most nights, but I needed the money. Balancing work and school was like running on broken legs. I skipped meals just to stretch my tips. My shoes had holes. My body ached from exhaustion. But the worst pain wasn't physical. It was seeing my stepdad's shiny new SUV pulling into the school parking lot. One afternoon as I walked home, I spotted him with his sons, fresh from soccer practice. He saw me. I know he did. But his eyes slid right past me like I was invisible. My chest tightened, and for a second I thought I might collapse right there on the sidewalk. I forced myself to keep walking. Every step felt heavy, but each one also hardened me a little more. That night, when my hands were raw from scrubbing dishes, my manager handed me my pay envelope. It was small, laughably small. Still, I clutched it like treasure. Because it wasn't just money. It was proof I could stand, even when no one believed I could. It was my English teacher, Mrs. Parker, who finally noticed. She pulled me aside after class one day, her brow furrowed. "Kimberly, you're bright. But you look so tired. Is everything okay at home?" The words unlocked something in me. Tears spilled before I could stop them. I mumbled the truth. How my stepdad had kicked me out, how I was sleeping on couches and working nights just to get by. Mrs. Parker didn't flinch. She handed me a brochure for a scholarship program for students in challenging circumstances. "Fill this out," she said softly. "You deserve a chance." That night, I sat at the diner counter after closing, the brochure under my arm. The lights hummed above me, the smell of coffee still in the air. I filled out every line, my pen shaking. I wrote about wanting more, about proving I wasn't just the girl abandoned at 16. A week later, an envelope arrived. My hands trembled as I tore it open. "Congratulations. You've been selected." For the first time in months, I felt something I thought I'd lost forever. Hope. Graduation came faster than I expected. I wore a hand-me-down dress and shoes that pinched my feet, but I walked tall. The gymnasium was packed with families, cameras flashing, cheers filling the air. But not for me. I scanned the crowd as I lined up for my diploma. No mother. No stepdad. No familiar faces. My eyes blurred, but I refused to let the tears fall. When my name was called, I walked across the stage alone. The applause was polite, generic. No shouts of pride, no hugs waiting for me at the end. Still, I gripped the diploma tight. This piece of paper was mine. Earned. Not gifted. Afterward, I lingered outside while my classmates posed with their families. Balloons. Flowers. Laughter everywhere. I slipped away quietly, clutching my folder like it was a shield. At the bus stop, I looked down the road, my suitcase at my side. Ahead was college. Ahead was survival. I whispered to myself, "Never again will I need them. From here on, I will make my own way." And for the first time, that promise didn't feel impossible. It felt real. College life was harder than anything I had imagined. My scholarship covered tuition, but not much else. Rent, food, books, it all fell on me. I lived in a cramped room with peeling paint and a broken heater, and most nights I lived on instant noodles. I took 2 part-time jobs, cleaning classrooms before sunrise and working in a laundromat until midnight. Sleep became a luxury. My classmates laughed about dorm parties, but I was too busy counting quarters to afford detergent. Some days, I wanted to quit. I felt like that abandoned 16-year-old all over again. Tired, hungry, and invisible. But then I remembered my stepdad's words. "Don't come back begging." That memory burned like fuel. Every late night folding clothes, every essay written at 3 a.m., every skipped meal. It was a brick in the foundation I was building for myself. Then something changed. The landlord of my building, an older man named Mr. Harris, noticed how I paid rent on time, no matter what. He offered me a deal, help him with tenant paperwork and small repairs, and he'd knock money off my rent. I said yes without hesitation. That's when I learned the first thing that would change my life. Property wasn't just walls and floors. It was an opportunity. Mr. Harris taught me more than I expected. He showed me how leases worked, how tenants could be managed, how to spot a property worth fixing. I listened, asked questions, and scribbled notes like my life depended on it, because in a way, it did. After graduation, I worked a steady job at an office by day and saved every penny I could. At night, I still did small cleaning jobs. By 23, I had enough for a tiny investment, a beat-up house on the edge of town, paint peeling, roof sagging. Most people wouldn't have touched it. But I saw something else. On weekends, I painted walls, scrubbed floors, and learned how to fix a leaky sink from YouTube videos at the library. My hands blistered, my back ached, but I kept going. 3 months later, I sold it. My profit wasn't huge, but it was enough to try again. I stood in front of that empty house, key in hand, and whispered, "This is only the beginning." For the first time since I was 16, I didn't feel powerless anymore. I felt unstoppable. One by one, the houses came. Old kitchens replaced with new counters, broken windows swapped for fresh glass. I wasn't just fixing buildings, I was fixing myself. By the time I was 26, I had flipped 3 houses and bought a small duplex I could rent out. My name started floating around among real estate agents. "That girl knows what she's doing," they'd say. But life has a funny way of circling back. One evening, I was at the grocery store buying discount bread when I overheard 2 men talking near the checkout. "Did you hear about Mark? His investments tanked. Might lose his house." I froze. Mark. My stepdad. The man who had once stood tall and smug, tossing me aside like garbage. The bread nearly slipped from my hands. My chest pounded. For years, I had imagined this moment, but hearing it out loud made my knees weak. As I walked out of that store, I couldn't help the small smile tugging at my lips. The tables were turning. I kept climbing. More flips, more rentals, smarter deals. Every win built another layer of armor over the girl who had once cried herself to sleep on a friend's couch. At 29, I closed on a sprawling mansion that had been foreclosed. It was a wreck, chipped marble floors, weeds strangling the driveway, but I saw potential. I spent months overseeing its restoration. Every detail mattered, from the chandelier in the foyer to the library shelves I had dreamed of since I was a kid. When I finally moved in, I stood on the balcony, overlooking the land. My chest swelled with pride. This was more than a house. It was proof. Proof that I had survived. Proof that I had built something no one could take from me. And deep inside, I knew it was also a stage. Because the past wasn't done with me yet. The call came late one night. My phone lit up with a number I hadn't seen in years. Kimberly. The voice was thin, shaky. My mother. I almost hung up. But something in her tone made me pause. It's Mark," she stammered. "He's lost everything. The house, the business, everything. We don't have anywhere to go." I leaned back in my chair, the silence stretching. My mother's voice cracked. "Can you help us? Just for a while." Her words cut like glass. The same woman who had watched me thrown out at 16 now begged me for shelter, for him. My lips curled into something between a laugh and a scoff. After all these years, the man who had warned me not to come back begging was the one begging. And I had a mansion big enough for the whole world to see. For 2 days, I let the call sit in my mind like a thorn. I couldn't stop hearing my mother's pleading voice. I thought back to the girl at 16, standing outside with a backpack while they shut the door in my face. Finally, curiosity got the better of me. I agreed to meet her at a small diner in town. When I walked in, she was already there, her hair grayer, her hands shaking around a cup of coffee. "Kimberly," she whispered, like my name itself was fragile. Then he walked in, Mark. He didn't look like the man I remembered. His face was thinner, his shoulders slumped, his once proud eyes dulled. "We need a place," he said, not even trying for small talk. "Just until we get back on our feet." I stared at him across the table, the smell of burnt toast filling the air. My hands clenched around my coffee cup. "I was 16 when you told me to fend for myself," I said quietly. "You remember that night?" His jaw tightened. He didn't answer. The silence between us was louder than his words. The meeting ended without a promise. I left them in the diner booth, staring after me like I was the cruel one. But the truth was, I felt lighter walking out than I had in years. That night, I stood in my mansion's grand hallway, staring at the staircase that curved upward like something out of a dream. I thought about how far I'd come. And for the first time, I felt like I had the upper hand. The next day, another call came. This time from Mark himself. "Kimberly," he said, his voice rough. "I was wrong back then. I know it. But my boys." I cut him off. "Your boys are grown now, aren't they?" Silence. I let it hang there. Then I said, "You told me never to come back begging. Why should I open my doors to you now?" His breath hitched on the other end. For years, I had dreamed of this moment. Hearing the crack in his voice was almost sweeter than I imagined. The calls didn't stop. My mother tried the gentle approach, saying things like, "Family sticks together." Mark tried pride first, then pity, then anger. But the more they asked, the stronger I felt. I started remembering details I'd pushed away. The smirk on my stepbrothers' faces when they moved into my room. The way Mark's voice had dripped with finality when he told me to leave. The sharp, cold look in my mother's eyes when she didn't say a word in my defense. The mansion echoed with those memories. But instead of breaking me, they built me. Every polished tile, every chandelier, every painted wall. It all stood as proof that I didn't need them to become who I was. One night, sitting by the fireplace, I whispered to myself, "This house is mine. My life is mine. They don't get to take a piece of it." The power had shifted, and I wasn't giving it back. Eventually, I agreed to see Mark again. Not because I wanted to, but because I needed closure. We met at a cafe this time. He came alone, dressed in a wrinkled shirt, eyes darting around nervously. "You've done well for yourself," he said, forcing a smile. "I always knew you would." The lie sat heavy between us. "Cut to the point," I said. He leaned in, his voice lower. "We have nowhere else, Kimberly. The boys, they don't want us. Friends won't take us. You're all we've got." I stared at him, letting his words hang in the air. The same man who once had everything, business, house, family, was reduced to begging the girl he had discarded. "I was all you had at 16, I whispered back. "But you didn't care then." His face fell. And for the first time, I saw something in him I'd never seen before. Fear. After that meeting, things shifted. Word spread around town about Mark's downfall. People whispered in grocery store aisles, at church, in line at the bank. "Did you hear?" He asked Kimberly for help. She turned him down, of course. The humiliation ate at him. He stopped calling for a while. but the silence was louder than his begging had been. One evening, I drove past the old neighborhood. Their former house sat dark, foreclosure signs hammered into the lawn. I parked for a moment, staring at the place where I'd once lived. It hit me then. This was poetic justice. He had stolen my home, and now he had lost his. When I pulled back into the driveway of my mansion, the weight of the years lifted off me. I realized something powerful. Revenge wasn't about cruelty. It was about survival, and showing that no matter how far they tried to push me down, I had risen higher than they ever imagined. By the end of that summer, it felt like the whole town knew the story. At the grocery store, I overheard whispers. At the bank, glances followed me. People had long memories in this place, and they remembered the girl who was kicked out at 16. Now, they saw the same man begging her for help. One afternoon, I stopped by the diner where I used to work. The waitress, an old co-worker, leaned close and whispered, "Mark was in here yesterday. He looked rough. Couldn't even afford a full meal." I didn't say anything, just nodded. But inside, my heart twisted. It wasn't sympathy. It was recognition. Recognition that he was finally tasting the emptiness he once served me. A week later, Mark called again. This time, his tone was sharper, desperate. "Kimberly, don't humiliate me like this. People are talking. You think you're better than me now." I let the silence stretch, then answered softly, "No, Mark. I don't think I'm better. I know I am." He hung up on me. But his anger didn't shake me. If anything, it proved that the power he once had over me was gone. The next blow didn't come from him, but from his sons. One evening, I ran into the younger one, Jason, outside the grocery store. He looked older, worn down, nothing like the smug teenager who had once shoved past me in the hallway of my old house. He avoided my eyes, then finally muttered, "Dad's not doing so great. He says you won't help." I studied him for a moment. "And do you think I should?" He hesitated. His face turned red. "No. Honestly. No. He doesn't deserve it." The words stunned me. It was the first time I'd heard one of his sons acknowledge what Mark had done. For a second, I almost pitied him. Almost. As I drove home, I thought about that exchange. Even his own children were pulling away. The same boys he had chosen over me now saw the truth. It was the kind of justice I couldn't have planned, but it cut deeper than anything I could have said. That night, I sat alone in the library of my mansion. The fire crackled, casting shadows across the walls lined with books. I poured myself a glass of wine and let myself feel everything. The anger, the sadness, the years of silence. For so long, I had carried the weight of being unwanted. Even after my success, some part of me still felt like that girl with the backpack. I walked through the empty halls, my footsteps echoing. I touched the cool marble banister, the polished wood of the doors. "This is mine," I whispered. "Every inch of it." I realized then that the mansion wasn't just walls and stone. It was proof of my resilience, proof that I had built something no one could take away. But another truth lingered in my chest. Revenge wasn't enough. I wanted closure. I wanted him to look me in the eye and hear me say the words he once spat at me. I wanted him to feel, for once, what it meant to be on the outside. I agreed to meet Mark one final time. We sat in the same cafe as before, the smell of burnt coffee thick in the air. He looked worse now. Hollow cheeks, sunken eyes, his clothes hanging loose. He started with excuses. The business failed because of the economy. I made mistakes, sure, but who hasn't? Family should forgive, Kimberly. That's what matters. I leaned forward. Family. You told me I wasn't family the night you locked that door behind me. He flinched. I pressed on, my voice steady. I was 16, and you gave my room away. You left me homeless. And now you want to live in my house? That door will never open for you. His mouth opened, then shut. For once, he had no retort. I stood, slid my chair back, and looked down at him. This meeting is over. So is whatever power you thought you had over me. Then I walked out, my heels clicking against the tile, leaving him in the silence he had once left me in. 2 days later, the phone rang again. This time, his voice was furious. You're selfish, Kimberly. After everything I did for you. I cut him off, my tone sharp as glass. Everything you did for me? You mean throwing me out like trash? You mean watching me starve and struggle while you sat at home with your sons? He tried again, louder. You wouldn't have survived without me. You should be grateful. I laughed, bitter and cold. Grateful? Everything I have, I earned without you. Every single brick in this mansion is mine. And you'll never take credit for it. There was silence on the line. Then a click. I set the phone down, my heart pounding. But instead of fear, I felt something new. Relief. For the first time since I was 16, I wasn't carrying his voice in my head anymore. I was free. Weeks passed. The calls stopped. The silence felt heavy, like a storm waiting to break. Then, one evening, my doorbell rang. Through the glass, I saw him. Mark. Standing on my porch, shoulders hunched, clutching a worn bag. I opened the door just enough to hear him. His voice was barely above a whisper. Please, Kimberly. Just a place to sleep. Just a roof. I'll stay in the garage if I have to. For a moment, I saw the man who had once stood tall and cruel, now bent and broken. But then I remembered the 16-year-old girl on the curb, clutching her backpack in the cold night while her mother stood silent. I stepped outside, closing the door behind me. You told me never to come back begging, I said softly. And I didn't. But here you are. His eyes watered. For the first time, he seemed small. I turned, walked back inside, and shut the door. His muffled voice called after me, but I didn't open it again. The next morning, neighbors were buzzing. Mark had been seen sitting on my front steps, head in his hands. Some whispered in pity, others in judgment. I poured myself coffee and listened from the kitchen window. For years, I had lived with the sting of being the subject of gossip. Now it was his turn. By afternoon, he was gone. I heard he tried staying with an old friend, but even that didn't last. His pride, once his armor, was now his prison. That night, I sat by the fireplace in my library. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel cruel. What I felt was peace. For years, I had thought revenge meant seeing him suffer. But as I stared into the flames, I realized it wasn't about that. It was about reclaiming the power he had stolen from me. And now, sitting in my own home, the mansion I had built brick by brick. I knew that power was mine. A few weeks later, I ran into my mother at the grocery store. She looked thinner, tired, with lines etched deep into her face. She hesitated before speaking. "You turned him away," she said, not quite a question. I met her gaze steadily. "Yes. The same way you turned away from me." Her eyes filled, but she didn't argue. Instead, she whispered, "I'm sorry." For a moment, I almost softened. Almost. But then I remembered all the nights I had cried on strangers' couches, the years of silence from her. "Sorry doesn't erase the past," I said gently. "And it doesn't change who I am now." She nodded, looking down at her basket. I walked away before she could say more. Outside, the sun was bright, the air crisp. I breathed it in, realizing that I no longer needed her apology, or his. I had written my own ending. Not long after, I heard that Mark had taken a job sweeping floors at a warehouse across town. The man who once strutted around in polished shoes now pushed a broom for minimum wage. People pitied him. Some laughed. But I didn't feel either. One evening, I drove past the warehouse. I saw him through the open bay door, hunched, moving slowly. For a moment, I stopped, watching. He never looked up. And that was enough for me. I didn't need to confront him again. I didn't need to hear him beg. I had already won, not by slamming the door in his face, but by living the life he thought I'd never have. The mansion, the career, the peace, all of it was proof that I had risen. And no amount of his regret could ever take it away. Years later, I still sometimes think of that night when I was 16. The backpack, the cold curb, the sound of the door shutting behind me. But now, when I walk through the grand halls of my home, I don't feel the sting anymore. I feel gratitude for the strength that night forced me to find. Mark never did recover. Last I heard, he lived in a rundown apartment, forgotten by most. My mother kept her distance too. And me. I thrived. The lesson was clear. The family that had cast me aside never defined me. I defined myself. Standing on the balcony of my mansion, the city lights stretching below, I whispered the words I had carried for years. I made it. Without you. In spite of you. And in that moment, I wasn't just the girl who had been thrown out at 16. I was the woman who had turned survival into triumph. And I never looked back.